The rain came down in sheets over the Belgian forest, turning the November earth into a soup of mud and fallen leaves. Captain Jack Morrison pressed himself against the trunk of an ancient oak, his Thompson submachine gun cradled against his chest, and tried to remember what warm feet felt like. "You think they're really here, Captain?" Private Tommy Chin whispered, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Jack didn't answer immediately. He was studying the ruins of what had once been a German research facility, now just skeletal remains of concrete and twisted steel jutting from the forest floor like broken teeth. Intelligence said it had been abandoned 3 weeks ago, but Jack had learned the hard way that intelligence was often wrong. "Only one way to find out, kid." They moved forward in formation, 8 men against whatever the hell might be waiting in those ruins. Jack had been doing this for 2 years now, ever since his engineering degree had gotten him pulled from a cushy position at MIT and dropped into the Office of Strategic Services. Turns out the army needed people who understood how things worked when they wanted to figure out what the Nazis were building. And the Nazis, God help them all, were building some truly terrifying shit. The facility's main entrance had been blown open, probably by the Germans themselves during evacuation. Jack signaled for his team to spread out, then descended into the darkness with his flashlight cutting a pale beam through the dust and debris. What he found in the first chamber made his blood run cold. The remains of something that looked like a jet engine, except scaled up to the size of a locomotive. Blueprints scattered across tables, equations scrawled on chalkboards in handwriting so precise it looked like typeface. And in the corner, a prototype that defied everything Jack knew about physics, a device that seemed designed to create some kind of acoustic resonance wave. "Jesus Christ," Tommy breathed beside him. "What is this stuff?" "The future," Jack muttered. "Or the end of the world. Hard to say which." That's when he heard it. A soft sound, almost like breathing, coming from behind a collapsed wall section. Jack raised his weapon and moved forward carefully. "Come out slowly. Hands where I can see them." The figure that emerged from the shadows was not what he expected. She was young, maybe 25, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that flickered with intelligence and fear in equal measure. Her gray dress was torn and dirty, and she held her hands up in surrender, but there was something defiant in the way she stood, spine straight despite the obvious exhaustion. "Don't shoot," she said in accented but perfect English. "Please. I am not armed." "Who are you?" Jack demanded, though he kept his gun trained on her center mass. "Dr. Elise Hoffman." She swallowed hard. "I'm a physicist. I worked here." Tommy let out a low whistle. "She's one of them, Captain. We should. Can it, Private?" Jack studied the woman more carefully. There was something in her eyes, something desperate and genuine that made him pause. "Why didn't you evacuate with the others, Doctor?" "Because I couldn't let them take it." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I couldn't let them use what we built." 3 hours later, Elise sat in the back of their transport truck, wrapped in Jack's spare jacket and drinking terrible army coffee from a canteen cup. She hadn't stopped shaking since they'd pulled out of the facility. Jack sat across from her, studying her face in the dim light of the truck's interior. His men were giving him looks. He could feel their eyes on his back, but he ignored them. Something about this woman's story didn't add up, and Jack had always been good at puzzles. "Tell me again," he said quietly. "From the beginning." Elise closed her eyes. "I was recruited from the University of Berlin in 1941. They told me I would be working on acoustic research, submarine detection, that sort of thing. Defensive technology." She laughed bitterly. "I was naive enough to believe them. But it wasn't defensive." "No." She opened her eyes and met his gaze directly. "They wanted a weapon. Something that could level entire cities without explosives, without radiation. Pure sound, focused and amplified until it could tear apart concrete, shatter steel, rupture human organs from the inside out." Jack felt his stomach turn. "And you built it?" "We built 3 prototypes." Her voice was barely audible now. "The first 2 failed. The third, Captain, the third one worked. I heard it tested on prisoners from the camps. The sound it made." She pressed her hands over her ears, as if she could still hear it. I sabotaged it 2 days before they planned to move it east. Then I stayed behind to make sure the formulas were destroyed. But they weren't all destroyed. Jack had seen those blueprints, those equations. Enough remained that someone clever could potentially reconstruct the work. No, Elise admitted. I couldn't bring myself to burn everything. All that knowledge, all that research, even if it came from something terrible, it was still. She trailed off, looking ashamed. Scientific progress, Jack finished softly. Yeah. I get it. She looked up at him with surprise. You do. I'm an engineer, doctor. MIT, class of 40. Before the war, I was working on aircraft turbine design. He smiled without humor. Then I got recruited to figure out what weapons the other guys were building. Turns out I'm pretty good at taking things apart and understanding how they work. So yeah, I get the seduction of the elegant equation, even when it's designed to kill people. For the first time since they'd found her, Elise's expression softened slightly. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Someone less. She searched for the word. Less human, I suppose. Jack laughed despite himself. Lady, we're all human. That's the whole problem. The truck hit a pothole and they both grabbed for handholds. Outside, Jack could hear the rest of the convoy grinding through the muddy roads, heading back toward the temporary OSS base near Liège. When they got there, Elise would be turned over to intelligence for interrogation. Jack would write his report, and whatever secrets she carried in that brilliant mind of hers would be extracted and weaponized by his own side. The thought made him feel sick. Captain Morrison? Elise's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Yeah. What will happen to me? Jack wanted to lie, to tell her it would be fine, that she'd be treated well and fairly. But he respected her too much for that. They'll question you. Extensively. They'll want every detail about the weapons program, everyone you worked with, everything you know. He paused. It won't be pleasant, but if you cooperate, you'll be treated as an intelligence asset, not an enemy combatant. And then you disappear into some laboratory where you'll spend the rest of the war helping us build bigger and better ways to kill people. He met her eyes. I'm sorry, but that's the truth. To his surprise, Elise smiled. A sad, tired smile that made her look even younger than she was. At least you're honest. That's more than most soldiers would give me. I'm not most soldiers. No, she agreed quietly. I don't think you are. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Jack couldn't quite name. Then Tommy's voice crackled over the radio, breaking the spell. Captain, we've got a problem. Roadblock ahead, looks like German stragglers. Jack was on his feet instantly, moving to the front of the truck. Through the rain-streaked windshield, he could see the rest of the convoy grinding to a halt. Figures were emerging from the tree line. Wehrmacht soldiers, at least a dozen of them, weapons raised. Shit, Jack muttered. He grabbed his Thompson and looked back at Elise. Stay down and stay quiet. We'll handle this. Captain, Elise's voice was urgent. Those aren't regular soldiers. Look at their insignia. Jack focused on the approaching figures more carefully. She was right. The lightning bolt runes on their collars marked them as SS. And the way they were moving, the professional efficiency of their formation, these were no ordinary stragglers. They're looking for something, Elise whispered. Or someone. The pieces clicked into place in Jack's mind with sickening clarity. They're looking for you. The facility, they know someone stayed behind. Captain Morrison. The voice came from outside, in heavily accented English. We know you have Dr. Hoffman. Send her out and we'll let you pass. You have my word as an officer. Jack barked out a laugh. Your word as an SS officer? That's rich. He could feel Elise trembling beside him now, but when he looked at her, her jaw was set with determination. You should give me to them, she said quietly. Your men don't deserve to die for me. Nobody's dying today if I can help it. Jack checked his weapon, his mind racing through tactical options. They were outnumbered and caught in the open. A firefight would be bloody on both sides. But the idea of handing Elise over to those bastards made his blood boil. Captain. It was Sergeant Mike O'Brien, Jack's second-in-command, appearing at his shoulder. We can take them, but we'll lose people. I know. So what's the play? Jack looked at Elise, at the fear and resignation in her eyes. He thought about those blueprints back at the facility, about the weapon she'd sabotaged, about all the terrible knowledge locked inside her head. He thought about what his superiors would say, about what the smart tactical decision would be. Then he thought about the right thing to do. We fight, he said. Get everyone into defensive positions. We're not giving up Dr. Hoffman. O'Brien grinned, the crazy, reckless grin of a man who'd been in too many tight spots to care anymore. Now that's the kind of stupid decision I can get behind. Let's give these Nazi bastards hell. The next 15 minutes were chaos. Gunfire erupted as Jack's team engaged the SS soldiers, bullets pinging off the truck's armored plating. Jack kept himself between Elise and the incoming fire, returning shots with controlled bursts from his Thompson. Behind you! Elise screamed. Jack spun to see an SS soldier charging from the tree line, rifle raised. He fired instinctively and the soldier went down. But more were coming, too many, pressing in from multiple angles. We need to move. O'Brien shouted over the gunfire. We're sitting ducks here. Jack grabbed Elise's arm. Can you run? Yes. Then stay close to me. They burst from the truck into the rain, sprinting for the tree line while Jack's men laid down covering fire. Bullets kicked up mud around their feet. Jack felt one tug at his jacket sleeve, missing flesh by inches. Then they were in the trees, crashing through underbrush, the sounds of battle fading behind them. Jack pulled Elise behind a fallen log and they both collapsed, gasping for breath. He could hear his men still engaging the enemy, buying them time to escape. We have to go back, Elise panted. Your soldiers are doing their job. Jack checked his ammunition, half a magazine left. Our job is to get you out of here alive. They'll disengage and regroup once we're clear. But, Doctor, those men chose to fight. Don't make their choice meaningless by getting yourself killed. He met her eyes. Besides, I didn't save you from the Nazis just to lose you in these woods. Elise stared at him for a long moment, rain streaming down her face. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a slightly hysterical sound that somehow made her seem more human. You Americans. You're all completely insane. Yeah, well, we get that a lot. Jack grinned despite the situation. Come on. There's a safe house about 3 miles north. If we can make it there, we'll be okay. They moved through the forest as quietly as they could, following game trails and creek beds. The rain helped mask their passage, but it also made the going treacherous. More than once, Elise slipped on the muddy ground and Jack had to catch her. Thank you, she murmured after the third time. Don't mention it. Can't have you breaking an ankle when we're this close. I meant for everything. For not handing me over back there. Jack kept his eyes forward, scanning for threats. You made your choice when you sabotaged that weapon. That took guts. I respect that. Even though I helped build it in the first place? You made a mistake. You tried to fix it. That's more than most people do. He paused. Besides, I've read enough about what the Nazis do to people who don't cooperate. Nobody deserves that, no matter what they've done. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the rain and their breathing and the occasional crack of distant gunfire. Finally, Elise spoke again. Captain Morrison, may I ask you something personal? Shoot. Do you ever wonder if we're all just building the weapons that will eventually destroy us? Jack thought about that question, really thought about it. About the atomic research he knew was happening somewhere in the American desert. About the jet engines and rockets and all the other terrible innovations that war was accelerating. About the future that seemed to be rushing toward them all like a freight train. Every damn day, he admitted. But then I figure, if smart people like you and me don't do it, someone dumber and more dangerous will. At least this way we have a chance of pointing the guns in the right direction. That's a very pragmatic philosophy. It's a very shitty philosophy, Jack corrected. But it's the one we've got. Elise was quiet for a moment. Then, I think I like you, Jack Morrison. Despite everything, the danger, the exhaustion, the weight of the world pressing down on them, Jack found himself smiling. Yeah? Well, don't spread it around. I've got a reputation as a hard ass to maintain. Your secret is safe with me. They emerged from the forest near an abandoned farmhouse just as dusk was falling. Jack approached carefully, weapon ready, but the building appeared deserted. Inside, they found dusty furniture and evidence that someone had been using it recently, probably resistance fighters. We'll hole up here tonight, Jack decided. Tomorrow we'll make contact with my unit and figure out the next move. Elise nodded, too exhausted to argue. She sank down onto an old sofa, and Jack noticed she was shaking again, not from cold this time, but from the adrenaline crash hitting her all at once. Hey! He sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. You did good today. You kept your head when things got hot. That's not easy. I was terrified, she confessed. So was I. Fear keeps you sharp. He hesitated, then added, for what it's worth, I'm glad you stayed behind at that facility. If those weapons had been deployed, the world would be a different place, Elise finished. Worse. Much worse. They sat together in the gathering darkness, neither quite willing to move away. Jack knew he should be planning their next move, figuring out communication protocols, doing a dozen other tactical things. But instead, he found himself studying Elise's profile in the dim light, the elegant line of her jaw, the intelligence in her eyes. Can I tell you something? She said softly. Sure. When I was working on that project, I told myself it was just science. Just equations and theories. I never let myself think about what it would actually do to people. She turned to face him. But after the first test, when I heard what happened to those prisoners, I couldn't sleep for days. I kept seeing their faces in my dreams, even though I'd never met them. That's called having a conscience, Jack said gently. Trust me, there are plenty of people on both sides who don't have that problem. How do you do it? How do you reconcile what you know about science, about building things, with what you have to do in war? Jack thought about that for a long moment. I guess I try to remember why we're fighting. Not for territory or ideology or any of that bullshit. We're fighting so that when this is all over, people like you can go back to building things that help instead of hurt. So that smart minds can be used for progress instead of destruction. Elise smiled, a real smile this time, one that reached her eyes. That's a beautiful thought. Don't tell anyone. I've got that hard-ass reputation, remember? She laughed, and the sound filled the empty farmhouse with unexpected warmth. Then, before Jack could quite process what was happening, she leaned over and kissed him. It was quick, chaste, barely more than a brush of lips. But it sent electricity through Jack's entire body. I'm sorry, Elise said, pulling back immediately. That was inappropriate. I don't even know what you are. My captor? My savior? How about just Jack? He found himself smiling like an idiot. And for the record, you don't need to apologize. No. No. He reached out and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Though we should probably table this conversation until we're not running for our lives from Nazi death squads. That's probably wise. Wisdom. One of my many virtues. And modesty, I'm sure. Oh, absolutely. I'm extremely modest about how awesome I am. Elise laughed again, and Jack felt something shift in his chest, something dangerous and wonderful and completely insane given their circumstances. But then again, maybe that was exactly when these things happened. When the world was falling apart and death was lurking around every corner, maybe that's when you grabbed hold of whatever light you could find. They talked through the night, keeping watch in shifts. Elise told him about her childhood in Berlin, about her father who'd been a violin maker, about falling in love with physics when she was 12 and never falling out. Jack told her about growing up in Boston, about his Italian mother who'd wanted him to be a doctor, about discovering that he could see how machines worked just by looking at them. It's like they speak to you? Elise asked, understanding immediately. Exactly. I can see the forces, the stresses, where things want to break or bend. It's almost intuitive. I'm the same way with mathematics. I can see the equations in my mind, how they flow and connect. She paused. It's isolating sometimes, isn't it? Being able to see what others can't. Yeah, Jack admitted. Yeah, it really is. As dawn broke through the farmhouse windows, painting everything in shades of gold and pink, Jack realized he was in serious trouble. Not the Nazi death squad kind of trouble, though that was definitely still a problem, but the much more complicated kind that involved catching feelings for a brilliant German physicist he'd known for less than 24 hours. We should move, he said reluctantly. Get some distance before they pick up our trail again. Elise nodded and stood, stretching stiff muscles. She'd taken off Jack's jacket during the night, and he could see the shape of her in the dawn light, elegant and strong despite everything she'd been through. Jack. She turned to face him. Whatever happens next, thank you. For treating me like a person instead of just an intelligence asset. You are a person, Elise. Don't let anyone tell you different. They gathered what supplies they could find. Some canned food, a canteen of water, a map that was probably outdated but better than nothing. Then they set out into the Belgian countryside, two scientists turned soldiers, navigating a world that had gone completely mad. They'd been walking for maybe 2 hours when they heard the engines. Jack pulled Elise into a drainage ditch just as a convoy of German trucks rumbled past on the road above. Through the tall grass, he could see Wehrmacht soldiers, regular army, not SS. They looked tired and beaten down, heading west away from the advancing Allied lines. They're retreating, Elise whispered. Yeah. War's not going well for them these days. Jack waited until the last truck disappeared around a bend, then helped Elise out of the dish. Come on. Safe house should be just over that ridge. But when they crested the hill, what they found made Jack's heart sink. The safe house was burning. Black smoke poured from the windows of what had been a small cottage. Bodies lay scattered in the yard, resistance fighters, by the look of their civilian clothes and weapons. Someone had hit them hard and fast, probably the same SS unit that was hunting for Elise. Oh God, Elise breathed beside him. Jack did a quick tactical assessment. The fire was recent, maybe an hour old, which meant the attackers might still be in the area. They needed to move, fast. But then he saw movement in the tree line across from the burning cottage. A figure staggered out, a woman, clutching her side, blood seeping through her fingers. Jack, she's hurt. I know. Stay here. He started down the hill, but Elise grabbed his arm. We should go. This is a trap. They're waiting for someone to come help. She was probably right. It was a classic tactic, leave bait and wait for the rescue attempt. But Jack couldn't just leave that woman to die. Then I guess we'll spring it together. He grinned at her shocked expression. What? You didn't think I'd have all the fun, did you? They moved down the hill in a combat crouch, using the terrain for cover. The wounded woman saw them coming and tried to call out a warning, but her voice was too weak. Jack reached her first, catching her as she collapsed. English? He asked. Yes, she gasped. American? What's this? What happened here? This. Looking for someone. A woman. German scientist. She focused on Elise with obvious effort. Is that her? Before Jack could answer, gunfire erupted from the tree line. He dove for cover, pulling both women down with him behind a stone wall. Bullets chipped away at their protection, sending up puffs of rock dust. I counted 6 shooters, Elise said calmly, like she was discussing the weather. 3 in the trees to our left, 2 in that barn, 1 in the hayloft. Jack stared at her. How the hell? I can see the muzzle flashes. And I'm very good at spatial reasoning. She actually smiled. I told you I can see patterns. Okay then, genius. How do we get out of this? Elise studied the terrain with those sharp eyes of hers, calculating angles and distances. The barn is old wood, probably dry. If we could start a fire, create smoke cover. They'd have to reposition, giving us a chance to run. Jack finished her thought. He pulled a thermite grenade from his belt, one he'd been saving for special occasions. This'll do it, but we'll have maybe 30 seconds before they adjust. Can you run with her? He nodded at the wounded resistance fighter. I'll manage. That's my girl. The words slipped out before Jack could stop them, but Elise just smiled and gripped the other woman's arm. Jack threw the thermite and the world exploded in white-hot fire. The barn went up like a torch, sending SS soldiers scrambling. Jack laid down covering fire while Elise half-dragged, half-carried the wounded woman toward the forest. They made it maybe 20 yards before Jack heard the crack of a rifle and felt something punch through his left shoulder. He went down hard, his Thompson flying from his hands. "Jack!" Elise screamed. "Keep moving!" He tried to get up, but his left arm wouldn't cooperate. Blood was spreading across his uniform jacket in a warm, wet patch. "Get to the trees." But Elise was already running back toward him, the wounded woman forgotten. She grabbed Jack's good arm and hauled him to his feet with surprising strength. "You idiot," she hissed. "You wonderful, stupid, heroic idiot. I've been called worse." Jack gritted his teeth against the pain and forced his legs to move. Behind them, he could hear the SS soldiers regrouping. "Elise, listen to me. If they catch us, tell them I forced you to come with me. Tell them whatever they want to hear. Just stay alive. Shut up and run." They crashed into the forest with bullets snapping through the branches around them. Jack's shoulder was on fire, his vision starting to blur at the edges. He'd lost blood, too much blood. But Elise kept pulling him forward, her jaw set with determination. "There." She pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. "We can make a stand there." "Make a stand with what?" "I dropped my weapon." Elise reached into Jack's jacket and pulled out his sidearm, a Colt 1911. "Then we use this. I'm a decent shot, believe it or not." "Of course you are. Is there anything you can't do?" "Apparently, I can't stop myself from falling for reckless American soldiers." Even through the pain and adrenaline and fear, Jack felt his heart do a stupid little flip. "Yeah, we should definitely revisit that topic later. It's a date." They reached the outcropping and Jack slumped against the rocks, trying to stay conscious. Elise checked his wound with practiced efficiency. "It went through," she announced. "You're lucky. No shattered bone, probably missed the major vessels." "Lucky?" "Right." Jack laughed weakly. "That's me. Mr. Lucky." The SS soldiers were getting closer. He could hear them calling to each other in German, coordinating their approach. Elise raised the Colt with both hands, her face calm and focused. "How many rounds?" she asked. 7 in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. 8 soldiers. Not good odds. Story of my life. Jack forced himself to focus through the pain. "Elise, if this goes south." "It won't." "But if it does." "Jack Morrison, if you're about to give me some noble speech about not blaming myself, you can save it." She glanced at him with those incredible eyes. "I sabotaged a weapon that could have killed millions. I chose to stay behind when I could have run. And I chose to trust you when I had every reason not to. I don't regret any of it. Even the part where you kissed me? Especially that part." She turned back to face the approaching soldiers. "Though I wish we'd had more time to explore where that might lead." "Me too." The first SS soldier emerged from the trees and Elise fired. Jack saw the man go down, center mass, perfect shot. The others scattered for cover. "Not bad for a physicist," Jack murmured. "My father taught me to shoot rabbits when I was 12. Turns out the principles are the same." She fired again and again, each shot precise and economical. But there were too many of them, and she was down to 3 rounds. Then, miraculously, Jack heard something that made him want to weep with relief. American voices. American engines. His unit had found them. The firefight that followed was brief and brutal. O'Brien and the rest of Jack's team swept through the forest like avenging angels, catching the SS soldiers in a crossfire. Within minutes, it was over. "Jesus, Captain, you look like shit," O'Brien said cheerfully, dropping to his knees beside Jack. "Let's get that shoulder patched up before you bleed out." "Good to see you too, Sergeant." Jack managed a weak smile. "How'd you find us?" "Tracked you from the roadblock. Then we saw the smoke from that barn and figured you were either dead or doing something characteristically stupid." He glanced at Elise, who was standing with the Colt still raised, her hands steady. "I'm guessing stupid." "Hey, we're alive, aren't we?" "Barely." O'Brien started field dressing Jack's wound, working with the quick efficiency of someone who'd done this 100 times. We also picked up some interesting intel from those SS bastards we captured. Seems like Dr. Hoffman here is quite the prize. Berlin wants her back real bad. They can't have her, Jack said firmly. That's what I figured you'd say. O'Brien grinned. Good thing the brass agrees. They want her stateside ASAP, along with all that research from the facility. You're escorting her personally. Jack looked at Elise, who had finally lowered the gun and was staring at the aftermath of the battle with a shell-shocked expression. He wanted to go to her, to tell her it was okay, that they'd made it. But his legs weren't cooperating. Elise, he called softly. She turned to him, and he saw tears streaming down her face, the first tears she'd shed since he'd found her in that facility. She walked over and knelt beside him, taking his good hand in both of hers. We're alive, she said wonderingly. Yeah, we're alive. I shot people. I killed them. You saved my life. That's what you did. Jack squeezed her hand. Don't let it eat you up, Elise. You did what you had to do. Like I did at the facility? No. He met her eyes firmly. Nothing like that. That was them or us. You chose us. That's not something to feel guilty about.